Welcome to How Women Inspire. Today, I am thrilled that you're going to get to meet Dr. Julie Huang. Dr. Julie Huang is on a mission to enable scientific breakthroughs and cultivate inclusive communities to forge a diverse, empowered future generation in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. A tenacious woman in science and first-generation low-income student, she defied the odds and became an accomplished scientist with a PhD from Stanford. If that's not sort of like the ultimate, and a BS from Caltech, today she stands at the forefront of the life sciences as a staff scientist at Alector Inc., leading teams and orchestrating scientific strategies for clinical trials that hold a promise and in transforming the treatment landscape for neurodegenerative diseases. I think I might have seen some of those this week on the news. Prior to Elector, Dr. Huang was a lead scientist at Caribou Biosciences, where she conducted pioneering studies on CRISPR engineered microbes, envisioning novel avenues for combating cancer. And I know you are a strong advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you so much for using your journey to mentor and inspire those from underrepresented backgrounds. You are the example. You are the person who gives people hope. And really excited to dive in. Julie, I would love to hear from you on the fun side. You're so brilliant. What is that theme song or the song that you break out in the days you need a little bit of lift?
Oh my gosh, I think if this had been a question that I asked for that you asked me last year, I wouldn't have known exactly what to answer. But in the last year, I've really resonated with Sia's "Unstoppable" song. That
Okay,
song.
why did you need to be particularly unstoppable this year? Was there something going on?
There was actually a lot going on. I've been actually going through a lot of self-discovery, transformation in a lot of ways, and both personal and professional, and just really tapping into myself. And I think sometimes doing those kind of inner work really is very challenging and can be very scary. And at one point, I was trying out some new things, and I had a dear friend who sent me that song on a morning that I really needed to hear it. And ever since then, I listen to it whenever I am coming across something that is new, unknown, that I might have insecurities about. And it makes me feel like I'm unstoppable.
Okay, the fact that somebody with your background feels like you have moments of self-doubt just makes me feel a little bit less, broken over here. Like, thank you so much for sharing that and being vulnerable and authentic about your own journey, because people from the outside look at you and they're like, well, there's something about her genetic makeup that she just is unbelievably unstoppable and has been able to do all this. It must be easy for those PhDs from Stanford, but it sounds like you're just like the rest of us and needing a little bit of extra support in those moments.
Yes, for sure. And, in some ways, that is also why I'm so passionate about mentoring students as well as early career professionals and
Yeah.
being part of amazing communities like the one that you've cultivated of these fantastic, vibrant women that are
Yeah.
doing some amazing things to change the world. And I think all of us still have elements of these insecurities and
Yeah.
these limiting beliefs that might have been cultivated when we were younger. And I think when we share more of our own stories with other people, it helps for not only us to feel, less alone, but also inspires us to think about possibilities, instead of letting fears limit what we think is ourselves.
Thank you for saying that. So you grew up in a very low income home, and then you literally been ceiling breaking since the time you were little, right? Like you became a scientist trained at Caltech and Stanford. Has that part of your journey shaped your perspective of what you just shared with us and even your role as a leader in the community?
For sure it has. And, I really couldn't have imagined when I was in middle school, high school, growing up in inner city Los Angeles, that I would be here today, on this podcast with you and to share my story and thinking about all the different experiences I've been so privileged to have by really stemming from the fact that I was able to have a college education. That was really the turning point for me is to be able to see that college was possible and for me to have my dream of becoming a scientist also to be possible. And what I think is really amazing about students that might come from these circumstances in which you might feel like they may be lacking certain things and not be able to keep up with others. I mean, certainly I had people tell me those things, but I would say that growing up in an immigrant family with other students like myself who were the first in our families to attend college, we have an amazing level of grit and resourcefulness because that's what we learned from our parents and our family members. And I think that's carried on throughout every part of my own career journey. As I think about new opportunities, as I think about involving and getting to know other people to help me identify where I want to go and how I might be able to do that. And so that has totally opened up the world, this level of recognizing that despite the circumstances, I still have that potential. And with
Yeah.
the help of kind and supportive people, nothing is actually impossible. And so that is truly my message to a lot of the mentees that I work with, as well as just individuals who I get the privilege, to speak to when I share my own story and then hear about their stories.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm so humbled and impressed that you not only have this unbelievable career, but you also are helping kids in STEM and you're sharing your recent pivot, this sense of, it's in your TEDx, right? Can you talk a little bit about can you give us a highlights of what this TED is going to be about?
Sure, sure. I was so excited when I had this opportunity. So I'll be quite excited when it is released with the video. But my story is pivots from scarcity to abundance. And I wanted that to be the title of my talk because, there's scarcity in the sense of not having enough, in terms of resources and financial means. And that certainly was part of my own story growing up. But there's also that scarcity mindset, which is something that I've been learning a lot about over the last few years that people have highlighted, which often stems from having lack of resources. But it's beyond that. It's like those limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves because of our circumstances. And that often then results in fear that keeps us from taking action. And for what I found early on in my life was as soon as I was able to break away from that fear and come at it with curiosity, curiosity to understand what is possible for, myself by seeing what's been possible for other people. And then being curious about someone else's path in their lives, that opened up the door for me to connect with individuals to then create opportunities
Yeah.
that I couldn't have imagined. And that's that abundance that I'm speaking about.
Yeah.
It's really the abundance of having that freedom to dream and then to go after it, and
Yeah,
that's
but I love the way you just described that. You're not just a theoretical abundance mentality, just have it. Like you're literally breaking it down into what is the motivation for it and how to think about it practically. What a gift, Julie. That's awesome. So thank you. I can't wait for everybody to get a chance to hear your TEDx. You certainly are unbelievably strong, but I understand you've had some great mentors in your career. Is that part of what inspired you to want to really support other people in STEM, or where's
yes.
some of this coming from?
Yes, mentors have certainly played such a big part in my career journey. And I think back to a lot of even some of the earliest mentors I had being my teachers in high school, ones that really pushed not only myself, but my friends and I to think about going to college and not just to colleges that were local. They really pushed me to think about colleges that would be a really great place for me to become a scientist, a place like Caltech, and even though again, there were a lot of also people who asked me whether I was prepared, and competitive enough to actually go to a place like Caltech. I luckily had teachers who were then mentors who not only said you could do it, but they wrote my letters of recommendation. They spoke to my abilities. And then when I was in college, Caltech is a smaller school and it's a really intense environment for those of us who get honored to attend. And yet I was so, just incredibly fortunate to have these professors who took me under their wing and helped me navigate college, not only getting the technical skills that helped me become the scientist that I am today, but also building up that confidence in becoming a scientist and having the conviction that, hey, I have what it takes to not only get through a place like Caltech, but to even get opportunities. For example, I would have never thought that I could apply for a Fulbright fellowship, which ultimately took me to Germany for a year to do research. And yet my mentor at Caltech, Dr. Sarkis Makinian, he really pushed me to apply for that fellowship. And that's what mentors do. They see in you what you may not see in yourself in that moment.
Love that. I
And
love that.
that's what I hope to do for those that I also mentor.
Oh my goodness, how beautiful. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth, and we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step? I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. So, there are so many misconceptions that I think girls in particular get caught up in. What message do you have for girls that want to follow in your path, but are hearing other messages?
Yes.
What do they need to hear?
I think the girls, what they need to hear is that they definitely have what it takes to make their dreams come true for themselves. And I think hopefully for a lot of girls, what's challenging is in this society, girls have a certain stereotype, and we're taught early on that, we need to be, at least for me, what I was taught was that I need to be quiet, do the right thing, and my work will speak for itself. And, to make sure that others are happy and that I do what it takes to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can work for a little while, but for most of us, when we want to really break out into our own authentic selves to pursue what it is that truly lights us up, we need to push against those.
Even if it disrupts the peace a little bit.
Exactly.
Shakes up somebody else's, sort of frame.
Exactly. And so what I do share with young girls is to not let other people's expectations of them hold them back. Because I think for me, in some ways, I had some of that when I was early on, wondering if I was the right person to pursue a certain path or whether I had what it took to make it and be successful in that path. And so I think it wasn't until I started to, again, started to question those misconceptions and to have mentors actually say, hey, there are different ways in which you can approach this, that it opened up my mind to being able to have that confidence to pursue those paths. And so with young girls, I do see that they have that level of curiosity. They can see dreams that they can envision for themselves. And what I hope is that we can just remind them to continue to tap into that authentic part of themselves and to not sway towards what they think they need to be like.
Yeah.
That ultimately, is not is not going to allow them to be the true person that they can be in bringing their true talents and also their gifts to whatever they pursue. So that's my strong, desire, is that everyone gets to be able to see what really lights them up and they can pursue those paths in an authentic manner for themselves.
When you created the formal mentorship program for young women, girls at Stanford, do you have any favorite stories from that? And by the way, thank you for that, for first generation and low income students. My husband's an immigrant, and my kids are the first in his side of the family to go to college. And so we put a scholarship together where my kids put money in and we put money in, and we all decide every year on a scholarship for a first generation low income kid. So this is really important and big passion of mine as a pathway. And boy, is it critical that we get their value. So do you have whatever the impact, or do you have a favorite story that you could share?
Yeah. I think that was such an incredible part of my time at Stanford, being able to come together with a small group to create this mentorship program. I mean, when I was in college, being first generation low income, that wasn't an identity that people talked about. No one talked about it. No one, recognized it. And now actually, there's a certain day in the year that we recognize the first gen identity. On November 8th. And I think when I was at Stanford, just having that ability to create that program, to see that there were actually individuals, staff members at Stanford who saw the importance of supporting this group, that in itself was just incredible. And I have to say, it actually allowed me to come out of my own shell. So even though I was doing this to create a community. I didn't realize until I was in the process of creating that community that I really needed this for myself too, to just be able to take that time to recognize this part of my identity, why it was important, and to not be ashamed of it. I think for a long time, students didn't want to share that they were first in their families to go to college or grew up in a low income community because
there's shame associated with it or something.
exactly. And now it's
like you're born into it. You have absolutely no control over any of it.
Exactly. But now, it's been amazing to see that we celebrate this identity. And so creating that mentorship program, I worked with a group to create it. We had 60 pairs in our first year, which was incredible. The amount of interest in participating.
Significant.
It was. We had 60 undergrads with 60 graduate students. And I have to say what was really beautiful about creating that program was not only the mentoring relationships, but because we were able to bring the graduate students together, we were actually able to see that, in fact, there was a great need for students in the graduate level to have a community. Because as you go farther up, in education as well as in career, there are fewer people who are like you in that first gen identity. And so we had students from across the campus, from the various schools, business, medicine, law school, engineering. And what I saw was that the mentoring program allowed us to give back by mentoring the undergrads, but it also gave the grad students an opportunity to meet each other and to form a community. And so we actually kicked off with a student-led organization for the graduate students. And I remember in that inaugural meeting, I had a room of probably about 60 to 70 students across the campus. And it was the most diverse group I had ever seen, in terms of gender, ability, race, and and of course, schools of training. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see that we were all there and, really connected by this common part of identity being the first in our families to college.
Well, and I love how you really, in so many ways, being an immigrant and being the first is a real superpower. You're not taking advantage of the opportunity. It also is fraught with some complexity and potential fragility as families, I know for my immigrant side of our family, it's sort of like, no, just stay at home with your parents. You don't need to go live on campus. Like some of those interesting messages that people get, like it's very, I don't think people who are not immigrants don't really understand that the tension between I want to take advantage of everything my family made possible by me coming to this country, but I also need to balance that with the cultural elements that you need to sort of align with, or you're going to be disruptive and get a little friction in your family.
Yeah. And in fact, those are the topics that I often I chat with my mentees about, or how do you balance the responsibilities that you likely still have in supporting your family while you're carving out this new identity as a professional, as a student and as a professional. And it's like entering this world of privilege as well, that kind of, in some ways, it could be a little bit of a cognitive dissonance, of experience. And actually, in a lot of ways, that's what I find to be some of the more important things to do as a mentor to students and early career professionals who are the first in their families to break into that world of higher ed as well as the professional world, is really feeling a sense of belonging, right? And balancing how they see themselves in this new world of privilege in a way, but then at the same time have the commitments and responsibilities to their families. And it's tough. It could be really tough sometimes. And I think it's kind of that mental shift in being able to see the best of both. And that, in fact, that's one of the great gifts of someone who comes from this background, is being able to move forward, which is what family members wanted. And at the same time, be rooted in where you've come from and that heritage that you come from. So that, for me, certainly has kept me grounded, as I continue to grow in my own career and think about ways to connect with individuals.
All right. I would love a view into what's next for you. You've done so much already. What is you in 5 years, Julie?
Oh gosh, that's a really great question. And I have to say it's a big question. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning, I'm going through my own self-discovery and kind of personal journey. And I want to say that what I know is that what really drives me is to be able to connect deeply with individuals and cultivate inclusive communities. And as a scientist, I also find that what I have the gift of being able to do is to share more openly and in a way that is receivable by broader communities of what science means and what science can do to help them improve in their lives. So I'm a huge advocate of science communication, and I do what I do as a scientist, where I work on clinical trials, not only to help bring potential treatments to patients, but to also be able to share the science that comes behind the development of that treatment, as well as that human journey.
Demystify it.
Yes,
Right.
demystifying it and
Yeah.
bring the human side of science to people. I think it is our duty, actually, as scientists, to be able to communicate what we do in a manner that the broader community could really understand. And so for
I
me,
want this to be on the big screen. I mean, honestly, to me, it's like, how about we actually make it cool and sexy? And I'm thinking Jurassic Park, but for the discovery of cancer solving things and whatnot. Like, you're gonna have a love interest. I'm just saying, Julie. But like, I'm envisioning this really exciting sort of like, what does it look like to go work every day on something and then have the big breakthrough? Like, how inspiring to young girls, right?
yes,
Start you, Julie.
I
Mhm.
totally agree. The more we can visualize and bring to, people the day to day and understand and, what we do, I think that's all the more important to really move forward,
Yeah.
from the scientific side.
Yeah.
So thanks for that idea. We're gonna have to keep that in mind.
Well, you're fantastic. What a treat to spend time with you. Thank you for all you're doing for young women and for science and solutions for things that are critical for our lives, and for really being so authentic and transparent about both your journey and what you're learning along the way. What a gift, Julie.
Thank you so
For
much,
that.
Julie. I'm really honored to be part of your community and on this podcast. Thank you so much for the time.
So, how can people find you?
People could best find me on LinkedIn. I am that's been a great platform for me to connect with individuals. And I really look forward to being able to not only share more of my story on LinkedIn, but to learn about others. And I've really been able to, I think that's how I learned about you and also how women lead. And so,
I hope everybody listening really, if you haven't really understood or been involved with an immigrant journey, I hope that you listen to this again, even with that lens, and really understand there's extraordinary superpowers of the courage and determination and the finding opportunity that comes from being an immigrant, and actually makes you a better entrepreneur. So there's so many great things about being superpowers about being an immigrant. And I hope that all the people who are felt like seen in this conversation. I'm just reflecting on just the terrible comments about immigrants that we heard from our next president. And really, you just did the perfect example, high performing, solving the world's problems and giving back and doing it in such a way full of grace and kindness. So thank you, Julie, for that. You're an amazing example. I can't wait to watch the TEDx.
thank you so much, Julie.